7 years ago, my colleagues would forget to invite me to their team dinners, whispering that the fat girl would just embarrass them at the trendy high-end restaurants they love. This morning, I signed the final papers to acquire the restaurant group that owns all three of those spots. They're mine now. And my old team? They couldn't even get a reservation, let alone afford the menu. Hi everyone, and welcome back. My name is Sophia. I'm 31 years old, and my story is about the difference between having a seat at the table and owning the whole damn table. It's a story about how the deepest social cuts can sometimes lead to the most delicious victories. The story I'm about to share is one I've kept close to my heart for a long time. Because being socially excluded, especially by the people you have to see every single day, is a unique and insidious form of torture. It's not a loud, dramatic confrontation. It's a quiet, slow, and steady erosion of your soul. It's the empty chair at the end of the day. It's the inside jokes you're not a part of. It's the deafening silence when you realize everyone has plans that you were never meant to be included in. And when the reason for that exclusion is your body, it becomes a public verdict on your worth. For years I believed I deserved it. I saw their cliquey, exclusive world as the pinnacle of success and sophistication, and I saw myself as the clumsy, fat, unworthy outsider. You start to internalize their whispers. You ask yourself the most painful questions. Just because I'm fat, do I not deserve friendship? Am I an embarrassment? Is my body so offensive that I deserve to eat my dinner alone while everyone else celebrates together? And in the lonely silence of your sad little desk lunch, the answer you start to believe is yes. But this is not a story about a lonely girl. This is the story of how that lonely girl built her own party. A party so spectacular that her old colleagues could only dream of getting an invitation. It's about the moment I stopped trying to get a seat at their table and started to learn everything I could about how to build a better one. It's about how I took my love for food, the very thing that contributed to the body they judged, and turned it into the foundation of a culinary empire. The journey was 7 years of relentless, grueling work. It was a war fought in hot kitchens, in business school night classes, and in the high-stakes world of investors and real estate. There were so many moments of terror, of near failure, of wanting to give up and retreat back to the safe, lonely world I knew. But the hunger I had, not just for food, but for a life where I was the one who wrote the guest list, was a hunger that could not be denied. I know, with every fiber of my being, that someone watching this right now knows the sting of being left out. You've seen the pictures on social media of the party you weren't invited to. You've heard the whispers of plans being made without you. I see you. I was you. And I'm telling you this story to show you that the best revenge is not getting invited to their party. It's building a life so magnificent that their party looks small and pathetic in comparison. Before we go back in time, to the cold, lonely office where I was deemed unworthy of a dinner invitation, I need to ask for your support. Your support is the first reservation at my table. It's a powerful message that our stories and our worth are undeniable. It gives me the courage to share the full, unvarnished menu of my journey. Okay, let's go back. Let's go back to a girl who was about to be left with a table for one. 7 years ago, I was a junior publicist at a high-powered boutique PR firm in the city. The agency, Apex Communications, was the epitome of cool. We had a sleek, minimalist office, a roster of trendy lifestyle and hospitality clients, and a staff that looked like they had all been cast in a TV show about attractive, successful people. I was not one of them. I was the fat girl. I was smart. I was a great writer, and I was incredibly good at my job. I could spin a story, charm a journalist, and land a client in a top-tier magazine better than anyone else in my department. But I didn't look the part. My body was the result of a happy, food-loving family and a college experience where late-night study sessions were fueled by pizza. I was confident in my work, but deeply, painfully insecure about my place in the social hierarchy of the office. I tried to compensate by being the hardest worker, the most helpful team member, the one who always stayed late. I was trying to make my brain so valuable that they would overlook my body. The antagonists of my story were not a single person, but a clique. The cool kids of the office. They were led by a senior publicist named Vanessa, a sharp, stylish, and deeply insecure woman who saw me as a threat. Her lieutenants were two other publicists, Liam and Chloe, both of whom were just as image-obsessed as she was. They were the gatekeepers of the office's social life. They were the ones who decided who was in and who was out. And I was definitely out. Our firm's culture was built around a work hard, play hard mentality. And the play hard part almost always revolved around food and drink. Our biggest clients were the city's hottest restaurants. Part of our job, and a major perk, was to take journalists and clients out for lavish, expensive dinners at these places. These dinners were where the real networking happened, where the relationships were built, where the promotions were unofficially decided. And I was never invited. It was a quiet, insidious, and utterly soul-crushing form of exclusion. It wasn't an official policy. It was just what happened. There would be a hushed conversation in the afternoon, a shared look between Vanessa and Liam. And then, at 6 o'clock, they would all stand up, laughing, and head out the door to a spectacular meal at a restaurant I had just spent a week pitching to the press. I would be left behind, in the quiet, empty office, with the lame excuse of, "Oh my gosh, Sophia, we totally forgot to ask you. It was so last minute. We'll get you next time." But there was never a next time. And now, for my supporter. She was the one person in that entire office who treated me like a human being. Her name was Evelyn, and she was the firm's financial controller. She was in her late 60s, a quiet, formidable woman who had been with the company since it was a two-person operation. She worked in a small, closed-door office in the back, the opposite of our trendy, open-plan space. She was the firm's memory, its conscience, and its quiet power center. Evelyn saw everything. She saw my hard work, and she saw the way I was being excluded. She never said anything directly, but she would find small, quiet ways to show me she saw me. She'd leave a copy of a particularly glowing client email on my desk with a simple handwritten note, "Good work." Or she'd stop by my desk on those lonely evenings when everyone else had gone out. I remember one night in particular. I was sitting at my desk, my heart heavy, listening to the echo of my colleagues' laughter as they left. I was pretending to be engrossed in my work, but really I was just trying not to cry. Evelyn appeared at my desk, holding a small brown paper bag. "You're working late again, Sophia," she said, her voice a quiet, no-nonsense rumble. "Just finishing up," I mumbled, not looking up from my screen. She placed the bag on my desk. "Nonsense. You're the best publicist they have, and they treat you like the hired help." She tapped the bag. "I was just at that new French bakery downtown. Their financiers are supposed to be the best in the city. I bought an extra one." I looked up at her, stunned. Inside the bag was a still warm, impossibly fragrant, perfect little almond cake. It was a small gesture, but it felt monumental. It was an act of quiet, subversive kindness. It was a shared meal, a table for two, in the face of my exclusion. "Thank you, Evelyn," I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. She just gave me a rare, small smile. "Don't let them grind you down, kid," she said. "The world is bigger than this office, and your talent is bigger than their small mind." Her words and her little cake became my lifeline. She was planting a seed, the idea that my worth was not determined by their guest list. She was showing me that real community, real connection, happened not in the trendy, exclusive restaurants, but in quiet moments of genuine kindness. The first major turning point, the incident that transformed the quiet pain of my exclusion into a full-blown public humiliation, was the annual company holiday party. It was the biggest event of the year, held at Celeste, the most exclusive, most expensive, and most sought-after restaurant in the city, our star client. For weeks the office was buzzing with talk of what everyone was going to wear, who was going to hook up, the drama of it all. I was, for once, included. It was a mandatory, all-hands-on-deck event. I was filled with a pathetic, hopeful sense of excitement. This was my chance to be a part of the team, to show them I could be just as fun, just as sophisticated as they were. I spent a week's salary on a new dress, a beautiful deep green velvet number. I got my hair and makeup done. For the first time, I felt like I might actually belong. But I was about to learn that a fancy dress and a mandatory invitation were no match for the deep-seated cruelty of a clique. The night was a slow, agonizing series of social cuts, and I was about to bleed out on the floor of the city's most beautiful restaurant. The night of the holiday party at Celeste was a night I had been simultaneously dreading and desperately hoping for. I walked into the restaurant, a place I had written dozens of glowing press releases about, but had never set foot in, and my breath was taken away. It was stunning. A cavernous, beautifully lit space with soaring ceilings, a massive marble bar, and a wall of windows overlooking the glittering city skyline. The air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume, delicious food, and the electric buzz of the city's elite. I saw my colleagues from Apex Communications already gathered in a laughing, glittering circle by the bar. Vanessa, Liam, and Chloe were at the center, holding court, their bodies draped in designer clothes, their smiles sharp and predatory. I took a deep breath, smoothed down my green velvet dress, and walked toward them, a hopeful, nervous smile plastered on my face. "Hi, everyone," I said, my voice a little too bright. The circle didn't open. They all turned, and a sudden awkward silence fell over the group. It was only a second, but it felt like an eternity. Vanessa looked me up and down, her eyes taking in my new dress, my carefully styled hair, with a look of cool, dismissive appraisal. "Oh, hi, Sophia," she said, her voice devoid of any warmth. "You made it." As if my attendance were a surprising, slightly inconvenient fact. The conversation resumed, but I was on the outside of the circle, a satellite in a cold, distant orbit. They talked about their inside jokes, about parties I hadn't been invited to, about a world to which I clearly did not have a passport. I would try to chime in with a comment, and it would be met with a polite, blank stare before the conversation moved on without me. I was invisible. I was a ghost at the feast. The dinner was even worse. The long, beautifully set banquet table was a map of the office's social hierarchy. The partners and senior publicists, including Vanessa's clique, were all seated in the middle, in the thick of the action. I was placed at the very end of the table, the Siberia of the seating chart, next to a junior accountant I had never spoken to, and Evelyn, the quiet financial controller. Evelyn gave me a small, sympathetic look as I sat down. She knew. She saw what was happening. Her quiet solidarity was the only thing that kept me from bursting into tears right there. Throughout the meal, I watched them. I watched my colleagues laugh and drink and network. I watched Vanessa hold court, telling a story that had the whole table roaring with laughter. I saw my boss, the head of the company, lean in to listen to her, a look of deep appreciation on his face. This was where it happened. This was where careers were made. And I was a million miles away at the end of the table, watching it all happen through a pane of thick, soundproof glass. The food, ironically, was spectacular. Course after course of the most exquisite, inventive, and delicious food I had ever tasted. But I could barely eat. Every bite felt like a betrayal of my own pain. The very thing I loved, the world of fine dining that I was supposed to be a part of, was being used as the stage for my own social execution. The final, fatal blow came near the end of the night. I had excused myself to go to the restroom, my heart heavy with the familiar, crushing weight of my own otherness. The restroom was a lavish, marble-clad affair, and as I was washing my hands, I heard voices from the small, private lounge area just outside the door. It was Vanessa, Chloe, and another female colleague. They were laughing. "Oh my God, did you see Sophia's dress?" Chloe snickered. "I know. It's like she skinned a muppet, the poor thing. I know, Vanessa said, her voice a low, venomous purr. She tries so hard, it's almost sad, but honestly, I'm just glad she's at the end of the table. Can you imagine if a client was sitting next to her? It's just a bad look. My blood ran cold. I stood frozen in front of the sink, my hands dripping, my reflection a pale, horrified mask in the mirror. They were talking about me. What do you mean? The other colleague asked. Oh, come on, Vanessa said, with an exasperated sigh. We're in the business of selling an image, an aspirational lifestyle. Our clients are the hottest restaurants in the city. They don't want to be represented by that. She paused, and I could practically hear the cruel smirk in her voice. It's not personal. It's just optics. You can't have a fat girl as the face of fine dining. It's just embarrassing. It makes the whole brand look cheap. Embarrassing. A bad look. Makes the brand look cheap. The words were not just insults. They were a professional verdict. A death sentence. They had taken all of my deepest, most painful insecurities. That I was an embarrassment. That my body was a liability. That I was unworthy of this beautiful world. And they had confirmed them all as cold, hard, professional fact. I felt a wave of shame so hot, so absolute. It was like being doused in gasoline and set on fire. I wanted to disappear. I wanted to melt into the marble floor. But I also felt something else. A tiny, cold, hard spark of pure, unadulterated fury, igniting in the pit of my stomach. I didn't confront them. I didn't burst out of the restroom and make a scene. That would have been what they wanted. That would have just confirmed their narrative of me as the emotional, inappropriate, fat girl. Instead, I waited. I stood there, my heart hammering, until I heard them leave. Then I took a deep, shuddering breath, looked at my own tear-streaked, devastated face in the mirror, and a strange, terrifying calm settled over me. It was the same calm I imagine a general feels in the moment they realize a battle is lost, and that a whole new, much longer, and much more brutal war must now be planned. I walked back out to the table. I sat down. I picked up my wine glass. Evelyn looked at me, her sharp eyes filled with a deep, knowing concern. "Are you all right, dear?" she whispered. I looked at her and I smiled. A real, genuine smile, but one that was cold and sharp around the edges. A smile that didn't reach my eyes. "I'm fine, Evelyn," I said, my voice a quiet, steady murmur that belied the roaring inferno in my soul. In fact, I've never been better. I've just had a moment of profound professional clarity. I stayed for the rest of the party. I was a masterpiece of polite, smiling, professional detachment. I watched them, my tormentors, as they drank and laughed, completely oblivious to the fact that they had just created their own worst enemy. They thought they had just delivered the final crushing blow to the fat girl at the end of the table. They had no idea that they had just armed her. They had given her a mission. That night, as I rode the taxi home through the glittering city streets, I made a vow. It was not a vow to lose weight. It was not a vow to win their approval. It was a vow of vengeance, but a vengeance of a different kind. They thought I was unworthy of their world. They thought I was a bad look for fine dining. Fine. I was going to stop trying to get a seat at their table. I was going to build my own world. I was going to build my own tables. I was going to build an empire of restaurants so beautiful, so successful, so utterly aspirational, that they would be the ones on the outside, their noses pressed up against the glass, unable to even afford a seat. The war had begun, and the first casualty had been the quiet, accommodating, people-pleasing Sophia, who had walked into that party. She was gone forever, and in her place a future restaurant mogul was born. The Monday after the holiday party, I walked into the office of Apex Communications a different woman. The shame and hurt were still there, a raw open wound in my soul, but they were now encased in a thick, protective layer of cold, hard, strategic rage. I was no longer the girl trying to earn a seat at the table. I was a spy, gathering intelligence behind enemy lines. My awakening had happened in that marble restroom, in the echo of their cruel, careless words. My counterattack was not going to be a loud, emotional confrontation. It was going to be a 7-year game of chess, a slow, meticulous, and ultimately devastating siege. My goal was not just to build my own table, but to eventually buy the whole damn restaurant where they had humiliated me. My grand strategy had 3 core phases, to be executed over the next 7 years. Phase 1, the education. I knew how to publicize a restaurant, but I knew nothing about how to run one. I needed to learn the business from the inside out. Phase 2, the apprenticeship. I needed to get my hands dirty, to earn my stripes in the brutal, unforgiving world of hospitality. Phase 3, the empire. I needed to accumulate the capital and the expertise to launch my own venture. My life immediately transformed into a grueling secret double life. By day, I was the perfect, efficient publicist at Apex. I did my work flawlessly. I was polite and professional to Vanessa and her clique. My calm demeanor, a mask for the cold contempt I felt. My apparent acceptance of my place at the end of the table made them comfortable, and their comfort made them careless. I sat in on meetings about restaurant financing, about profit margins, about staffing challenges. I was no longer just writing press releases. I was absorbing a business school education, and they were paying me for it. But my real life began at 6 p.m., when I would leave the office and head to my night classes. I enrolled in a rigorous hospitality and restaurant management program at a local university. While my colleagues were out sipping cocktails at our clients' trendy bars, I was in a sterile classroom, learning about food cost percentages, inventory management, and labor laws. The struggles were immediate and overwhelming. I was running on 5 hours of sleep a night. My social life ceased to exist. I was living on cheap takeout and the sheer obsessive force of my own ambition. There were nights I would be studying a dense textbook on restaurant accounting, my eyes burning, and I would be so overwhelmed with exhaustion and the sheer scale of what I was trying to do that I would just put my head down on the desk and cry. "This is insane," a voice would whisper. "You're a publicist, not a businesswoman. You're going to fail." But then the memory of their laughter in that restroom would echo in my ears. A bad look. Embarrassing. Makes the brand look cheap. And the fire would roar back to life. My shame was my fuel. My humiliation was my motivation. Evelyn, the firm's controller, was my silent, unwitting accomplice. She saw the change in me. She saw my exhaustion, but she also saw the new, hard glint of determination in my eyes. She didn't ask questions, but she became my secret mentor. I would go to her office with questions, framed as research for a client, about balance sheets, about P&L statements, about securing small business loans. She would look at me over the top of her glasses, a small, knowing smile on her face, and she would give me a masterclass in financial literacy. She was arming me for a war she didn't even know I was planning. After a year of this double life, I entered phase 2, the apprenticeship. An education wasn't enough. I needed to feel the heat. I quit my comfortable, well-paying job at Apex. I said my goodbyes, enduring the condescending, pitying looks from Vanessa and her crew. "What are you going to do?" she asked, a fake concern in her voice. "I'm going to learn how to run a restaurant," I said, my voice calm and steady. She actually laughed, a short, sharp, disbelieving sound. "Well, good luck with that," she said, before turning back to her friends. The idea of me, the fat girl, in the sleek, fast-paced world of high-end hospitality was, to her, a joke. I started at the absolute bottom. I took a job as a hostess at a busy mid-level bistro. It was a brutal, humbling experience. I went from a respected senior publicist to a woman in an ill-fitting uniform, dealing with angry customers and arrogant waiters. I was on my feet for 10 hours a day, my body screaming in protest. But I was learning. I was watching. I was seeing the flow of a service, the intricate dance between the front and back of the house. I was a sponge. I learned every job. I worked as a server, a bartender, a busser. I begged the grumpy, overworked kitchen manager to let me help with prep during my off hours. I learned how to chop an onion with lightning speed, how to make a perfect vinaigrette, how to read a kitchen ticket in the midst of chaos. My body, which had been the source of so much shame, became a tool. It became strong. I was still a big woman, but the softness was being replaced by the hard, functional muscle of a hospitality warrior. I could carry a heavy tray of dishes without flinching. I could stand for 12 hours without complaining. I was earning a different kind of respect, a respect that had nothing to do with my dress size and everything to do with my work ethic. For 3 years, I worked my way up the ladder, moving from the bistro to a better restaurant, then a better one. I became an assistant manager, then a floor manager. I was learning not just how to work in a restaurant, but how to lead one. I learned how to manage a difficult staff, how to charm a disgruntled diner, how to turn a disastrous Saturday night service into a smooth, profitable success. All the while, I was saving every single penny I made. I lived in a tiny apartment with 3 roommates. My diet consisted of staff meals and cheap groceries. I had one goal, one single, obsessive focus: to accumulate my war chest for Phase 3. The final phase, the empire, began in year 5 of my journey. I had the education, I had the experience, and I had a small but significant amount of capital I had saved. It wasn't enough to buy a restaurant like Celeste, not yet. But it was enough for a down payment on a dream. I found a small struggling cafe in a quiet, up-and-coming neighborhood. It had good bones but a terrible menu and no soul. I took my meticulously crafted business plan, a document I had been perfecting for 5 years, to a dozen banks. I was rejected by all of them. Too risky, they'd say, looking at me, a plus-size woman with no ownership experience. But Evelyn, my old mentor, had taught me well. She had taught me about alternative financing, about angel investors. I found a small local investment group that focused on women-owned businesses. I walked into that pitch meeting, my heart in my throat, and I didn't just sell them a business plan, I sold them my story. I told them about my vision: to create a space that was not just about food, but about community, about creating a table where everyone felt welcome. They believed in me. I got the loan. The next year was a blur of construction dust, menu testing, and sheer, terrifying, exhilarating work. I was on site every day, managing contractors, designing the space myself. I created a cafe that was the antithesis of the cold, minimalist restaurants my old colleagues loved. It was warm, it was cozy, it was filled with comfortable chairs, shelves of books, and the constant, incredible smell of freshly baked pastries and artisanal coffee. I called it the table. I hired a small, passionate staff. I trained them myself, not just on the menu, but on my philosophy: that every single person who walked through our door was an honored guest, to be treated with warmth, respect, and genuine kindness. We opened with no PR, no marketing budget, just a simple sign on the door. And for the first few weeks, it was terrifyingly quiet. There were days I was sure I had made a catastrophic mistake, that I was going to lose everything. But then, slowly, the neighborhood started to discover us. People came in for the incredible coffee, and they stayed for the warm, welcoming atmosphere. They came for the delicious, comforting food, and they stayed because they felt seen, they felt at home. The table became more than a cafe. It became a community hub, a movement. And I, the girl who was once excluded from every table, had become the hostess of the most sought-after table in town. The war was not over, but I had just won my first, and most important, battle. The table was more than a success. It was a phenomenon. The quiet, word-of-mouth buzz that started in the neighborhood became a city-wide roar. We were the opposite of everything that was trendy in the restaurant scene. We weren't exclusive, we were inclusive. We weren't minimalist, we were abundant. We weren't a place to be seen, we were a place to be yourself. And people were starving for it. The next 2 years were a whirlwind of growth. I took the profits from the table, and with the backing of my now ecstatic investors, I opened a second location, a larger, more ambitious bistro, in a trendier part of town. I called it The Feast. It was built on the same philosophy of warmth and inclusion, but with a more refined, upscale menu. It, too, became a massive success. I was no longer just a cafe owner. I was a restaurateur, a businesswoman. I was working harder than I had ever worked in my life, but it was a joyful, life-affirming exhaustion. I was building something real, something that mattered, something that was a direct reflection of my own value. My body, still fat, still curvy, was no longer a source of shame. It was the body of a CEO, a body that was strong and capable and powerful. It was the body that had built all of this. And my old colleagues from Apex, I would hear whispers about them through the industry grapevine. The firm was struggling. The world of PR was changing, becoming more about authentic connection and less about slick, exclusive parties. Their old-school, image-obsessed model was failing. Vanessa, I heard, had been laid off. Liam and Chloe were still there, but they were working for a sinking ship. I felt a distant, detached sense of vindication, but I was too busy building my own future to dwell on their past. The final, unbelievable, full-circle moment of my 7-year war came not in person, but through a phone call. I was in my office, a beautiful light-filled space above the feast, going over the quarterly reports. My assistant buzzed me. "Sophia," she said, her voice hesitant. "There's a Vanessa from Apex Communications on the line. She says it's urgent. She's asking about the acquisition." My blood ran cold. The acquisition. I knew what she was talking about. 3 of the city's most iconic fine dining restaurants, including the legendary Celeste, had been owned by a single old money restaurant group that had recently gone into bankruptcy. A week ago, my company, the Table Hospitality Group, had, after a long and competitive bidding process, successfully acquired the entire portfolio. The news was the biggest story in the city's culinary world. Celeste, the scene of my greatest humiliation, was now mine. "Put her through," I said, my voice a calm, steady line, my heart pounding a hole in my chest. I picked up the phone. "This is Sophia. Sophia! Oh my gosh, hi, it's Vanessa." Her voice was a horrifying caricature of forced, bubbly friendliness. The voice of a PR person who is about to ask for a massive, undeserved favor. "I'm not sure if you remember me. We used to work together at Apex." I smiled, a cold, sharp smile. "Yes, Vanessa, I remember you. Great. Wow, this is so crazy. Listen, I'm just calling because we at Apex saw the news about your acquisition of the Celeste Group. Huge congratulations. It's just incredible. We are all so proud of you." Proud of me. The sheer breathtaking hypocrisy of it was almost comical. "Thank you," I said, my voice still a flat, unreadable line. "What can I do for you, Vanessa?" "Well," she said, taking a deep breath, "here's the thing. As you know, Apex has handled the PR for Celeste for over a decade. They are our flagship client, our most important account. And with the acquisition, well, we're just hoping that you'll, consider keeping us on, to ensure a smooth transition. We know the brand better than anyone." I let the silence hang for a moment, savoring the beautiful, exquisite weight of it. She was pitching me. The woman who had deemed me a bad look for her clients was now begging me to become her client. The woman who had left me out of every important dinner was now begging me to let her sit at my table. "You want me to hire Apex to do the PR for my new restaurant group?" I said, my voice a quiet, dangerous question. "Yes, exactly," she said, her voice filled with a desperate, hopeful relief. We could do amazing things for you, Sophia. We could take your brand to the next level. I leaned back in my chair, the CEO, the queen in her castle, and I finally let myself feel the full, glorious, 7-year, delayed satisfaction of this moment. The shy, insecure publicist she had once tormented was now the woman who held her entire career in the palm of her hand. "That's interesting, Vanessa," I said, my voice dripping with a sweet, cold poison. "Because my memory of Apex is a little different. I remember it as a place where the image was more important than the talent. I remember a place that believed that a fat girl couldn't possibly be the face of fine dining." There was a sudden, choked silence on the other end of the line. I had just dropped the bomb, and I could hear the shrapnel flying. I don't know what you're talking about," she stammered, her voice suddenly small and shaky. "Don't you?" I asked, my voice still dangerously soft. "I remember a holiday party. At a restaurant called Celeste, I believe. I remember a conversation in a restroom. A conversation about how I was embarrassing. A bad look. How my body made the brand look cheap." The silence was absolute now. I could hear her sharp, panicked breathing. She knew. She was busted. "So, you'll have to forgive me if I'm a little skeptical about your ability to represent my brand, Vanessa," I continued, my voice now as hard and cold as steel. "Because my brand, the empire that I have built, is founded on the very principle that you and your little clique find so embarrassing. My brand is built on the idea that everyone, regardless of their size, their shape, or their background, deserves a seat at the table. My brand is built on inclusion. And you are the gatekeeper of a small, petty, and frankly failing world of exclusion." "Sophia, please," she whispered, her voice cracking, all pretense of professionalism gone. I was a different person then. We were young. The industry was different. Please don't hold that against me. Against the firm. We need this account. We really, really need it." And there it was. The begging. The desperation. It wasn't as satisfying as I had always imagined it would be. It was just pathetic. I looked around my beautiful office, at the awards on my shelf, at the view of the city I now felt a part of. My victory wasn't this moment. It wasn't her pathetic pleading. My victory was this office. It was my incredible staff. It was my 2 thriving restaurants and the 3 more I was about to build. My victory was the fact that I had built a world where I no longer needed her validation, her invitation, or her approval. Being fat is not a sin. Well, no. Believing that a person's worth can be measured by the size of their body is. The real sin is creating a world, a table, a party, where some people are deliberately made to feel like they don't belong. It is the ugliest, cheapest, and most bankrupting kind of business model there is. To anyone watching, to anyone who has ever been on the outside of that circle, to anyone who has been left off the guest list, listen to me. Stop trying to get into their party. Go and build your own. Build a party that is so full of joy, and warmth, and kindness, and success, that all the cool kids in the world will be begging for an invitation. And then, you get to be the one who decides who is worthy of a seat at your table. I'll have my assistant send over the termination of your contract with Celeste this afternoon," I said, my voice returning to its calm, professional CEO tone. "The table hospitality group will be handling all PR in-house. We have a different vision for the brand." "Sophia, no, please," she cried. "It's not personal, Vanessa," I said, savoring the beautiful, perfect irony of the word. "It's just business." And I hung up the phone. "So, what do you do when you finally a restaurants you were once excluded from?" "You throw a party, of course. But you do it your way." My first act as the new owner of the Celeste Group was not to fire everyone and start from scratch. It was to invite my entire, incredible hard-working staff, from the dishwashers at the table to the servers at the feast, to a massive, private, no-holds-barred celebration at Celeste. We closed the restaurant to the public for one night, and I told them to order anything they wanted, to drink the most expensive champagne, to eat until their hearts were content. It was a night of pure, unadulterated joy. It was a celebration of the people who had helped me build my empire. We were finally having our own party, in our own house. And everyone was invited. My life now is a testament to the fact that you can build a feast from a famine. I am the CEO of a thriving hospitality group, and we are changing the industry, one inclusive table at a time. We've redesigned the restaurants, not to be exclusive and intimidating, but to be warm, beautiful, and welcoming to everyone. And our success has proven that kindness is not just good for the soul, it's good for business. And I finally have a life outside of the kitchen. I reconnected with friends I had lost touch with during my 7-year war. And I met someone. A wonderful, kind, funny man, a food journalist of all things, who fell in love with my passion, my ambition, and my unapologetic appetite for all the good things in life. Our idea of a perfect date night is still trying a new restaurant, but now it's often one of our own. Sharing this story with you all, from the lonely office desk to the head of the boardroom table, has been a profoundly healing experience. For years, the memory of being left out, of being deemed an embarrassment, was a secret, painful wound. But sharing it here, in this incredible community, transforms that pain. It takes the memory of my exclusion and turns it into a story of our collective inclusion. You all, by showing up and sharing your own stories, prove that we can build a bigger, better, more welcoming world together. And that is why I need you to pull up a chair at our table. If this story of building your own feast resonated with you, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. And please, don't forget to hit that notification bell, because there is always a new delicious story on our menu. Every subscription is another seat at our table, making our community stronger and more vibrant. Now, it's your turn. This is the best part of the meal. I want you to go to the comments and tell me about the table you are building. What was a moment of exclusion that fueled you to create your own space of inclusion? Share your story of building your own party. I promise you, I will read every single one. Your stories are the recipes that inspire the rest of us to keep cooking, to keep building, to keep creating spaces where everyone is welcome. Thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing this meal with me. Remember, if they won't give you a seat at the table, go out and build a better one. Love you all, your Sophia. See you in the next story.